to Gregory Cox.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Good day, everyone. Good day, good day. Super excited. I've been excited for several weeks now since I knew that Greg was going to join me on this live dad talk. So I'm excited about it. So thanks, man, for joining me. I really appreciate it. Hey, once again, you guys, my name is Greg Cox. I am the Fatherhood Coalition Coordinator, and I'm excited. We are going to have a moment of a great time interviewing Greg, talking about some of the strategies and things that he faced in his life. And the first two we're going to talk about is his substance abuse and his incarceration, and how did it lead up to that? What led up to his incarceration and drug addiction? So introduce yourself, man. Tell the people who you are.
Hey, everyone. I'm Greg Sims. Glad to be here.
Awesome, man. So look, we talked about it, you and I, we talked about it before in terms of substance abuse, and Greg is currently in long-term recovery as well. And we talked about what led up to it. And so I wanted to just have this moment and listen to him talk about what led up to his substance abuse and how that changed the course of his life. So talk to us, man, about your addiction and what led up to all of the challenges that you faced.
Well, yeah, it started real early on as a teenager, through my high school years, even prior to that, middle school, just in 7th and 8th grade, I was using marijuana, of course. That was the thing back in the day. And then it progressed as I got into high school to harder drugs. And so with that being, the start of things, it just roller coastered as time went on. And as we know in addiction, our bodies get used to having something inside of us that makes us feel good, we think. And that very thing that made me feel good took me on a roller coaster ride.
Wow. And as a result of that, and how many years, man? How many years did you experience substance abuse?
Yes, that thing spiraled over 30-something years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as a result of the substance abuse, as a father, keep in mind, you guys, we talk about, this is a dad talking, as a father, it led you to incarceration.
Absolutely.
Talk about that for a minute. Talk about doing incarceration and then what happened to make you change and do something different, because I do know it's been some time since you've been incarcerated.
Yes.
And you are in long-term recovery now. So talk about that, man, in terms of what happened to you when you was incarcerated and you realized that, okay, what?
Yes. And see, the lifestyle, of course, had me what we call caught in the grips. And in that, I was be in and out of the county jail, the state penitentiaries. And what it did as a father, I was missing. I was missing birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, the holidays and things of that nature. And so during that time, my family struggled because I was missing.
Yes, sir.
And there was one incident where my oldest son said, "Dad, I'm having a football game. Can you be there?" And I promised him, "Yes, I'll be there, son, for you." Well, got arrested. And couldn't make my son's football game. And that was rough on him because he would see all the other dads, sitting in the stands cheering for their sons. And
he wanted you to be there.
And I was missing.
Yeah.
I was missing.
And so as a result of addiction, you got incarcerated. Yeah. So then what happened then? Was that at that time, was that the moment? What was the moment, the aha moment that says, you know what? I can't do this no more.
Yeah, well, that came later on, and then I ended up homeless. Me and the family had separated a few months there, and me and the wife were going through our little separation. And so I ended up incarcerated again. And it was there in the state penitentiary where I decided I just didn't want to live like that anymore. I made a conscious decision, I'm done with this, because it had torn away everything that I dreamed of, that I wanted. I was married for 17 years, raised my children, but the addiction took me through this incarceration. And at the end, when we say at the end of the road,
come on,
I was done.
After that's over with.
Yeah, I was done. And I said the simple prayer, God, I need some help, because I just didn't want to go back out into society the same way I came in there. And so things changed for me.
So you prayed out to God and said, God, I need some help.
Yes.
As a result of that, he sent you the help in the form of support. Talk about that. And you talked about having 3 principles that you stood on that helped change the course of your life, because now you're in incarceration, you're not using, well, you wasn't using.
No,
no.
That was the end of the year.
I'm gonna cover that. He wasn't using while he was incarcerated.
No, that was the end. I was done.
So he was done. And so then after that, you prayed out to God, and then you decided that, okay, something else had to change. And so you was introduced
to Narcotics Anonymous.
Okay, you was introduced to a 12-step program.
The 12-step.
And there were some principles that you adopted for your process of recovery, and you decided that, okay, these are the principles, and we talked about that before. What are those principles that you decided, look, these are the principles that I'm gonna follow?
Yes.
For my recovery.
And I adapted them from this 12-step program. And the first one, I had to get honest. And that's in our first step, because it started with me.
Okay.
And so I had to get honest with myself. And the honesty opened up some things for me, to where now I can start seeing things from a different perspective. A guy once told me, he said, Greg, change how you see things, and then the things you see, they'll start to change.
Wow, that's good.
And so once I got into that, I started to see things a little different, because my old decisions kept getting me in trouble. So I had to try something different.
Okay.
And so I had to get honest. And once I got honest with me, I knew I didn't want to use anymore. And so I used that first principle.
Come on.
To catapult me into this new way of life, this new way of thinking. And my behavior started to change, because after being released from the incarceration, the old thoughts and the old things that I was doing, I didn't want to do them.
That's good.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, you had an open mind to begin to practice the principles and do things that the recovery environment or the recovery community begin to suggest for you to do, which was begin to take some suggestions for some people who had walked that walk with you already.
Absolutely. And I would see it, not just hear it. I made a few meetings, and of course we would hear some things, but I start to see some individuals, I would say, and they showed me that it's possible that I could live a clean life and walk and achieve some things. And so I start the small things, the little things, just getting a job, paying a phone bill. See, those responsibilities start to come on, and I would take those responsibilities on head on and do the necessary things I needed to do to take care of myself.
Because one of the main things you want to get back to, knowing that you matter as a father in the life of your children.
Absolutely.
Right. It was about doing what I needed to do in order to change the course of your life, so that you can get back to being the father, the dad that you were with the kids before addiction had took off.
Absolutely. Because see, that was the main goal. In the back of my mind and in my heart, I was saying, my kids love me, but I need to love myself first, and then I can give them the love that they needed. And so as a result of these things start to change in my life, things start moving forward for that goal. So another part of that, I had to open my mind to some new things.
It's good.
Right?
Yeah.
And I tried there were some challenges, but I tried. I just gave it a good try. and some things start opening up, other things, doors start happening for me. And then it came to a point where my children were reintroduced back in my life. And so
now this time now, they're being introduced to a father who's in recovery, who got some principles, who's standing on some principles and changing the course of your life, and things start moving.
Sure.
Right. And so then after that, those two, there was a third crisis that we talked about, that you talked about in recovery. Greg and myself are fathers who have experienced losing a son through gun violence.
Yes.
And this was one of the challenges that you face in recovery now. Now that you're in recovery, you got some time away from incarceration, you got some time away from the substance, and then you was hit with another crisis. How did you handle that? How did you get through that?
Yeah, that came as a double blow. My dad and my son died 6 months apart from each other. In March of 2016, I lost my dad. But with my dad, I was more prepared for, because I seen it coming. I knew his situation, and it was just a matter of time. He was in hospice. And so I was able to be there with my dad right before he passed away. 6 months later, my son, he was killed due to the gun violence here in Chicago. And that caught me blindsided. I just didn't see that coming. My son was doing well, but again, the lifestyle, the lifestyle. And so that there was a hard blow. I was by myself, living a single life. I was clean, of course, but I tell you, it was traumatizing, because here I am back into my children's life. We're building our relationship again. We're starting new. And this is the same son that asked me to be at his football game.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's the first time I'm hearing that.
Yeah.
And so during this process, so what did you do, or what tool did you use in order to get through that crisis? Because now here's a crisis that happened, two major crises 6 months apart, but now you're drug free, you're not using, you're not incarcerated. How did you get through that or process that, whereas though you didn't have to pick up a drug again or a mask by using another substance again? What was some of the tools that you used?
Okay, again, it was my higher power that helped me through the whole process. But there were other people that I took to.
That's good.
Because they had the experience of, again, having their child killed in these streets of Chicago by the gun violence. So I would talk to some people. I would call them and ask them, how did you handle it?
Okay.
And there was one that stuck out. Her name was Rita. And Rita would tell me, she said, Greg, you'll never get over it, but over time, it'll get easier and easier to cope for you to deal with it. And there were times, I must say, we as men, we have this macho image, but there were times I cried. There were times, moments, I would break down because I loved it, my son. And we were building this bond back together. And for this to happen to him, it traumatized.
Yeah.
It did.
But you being in recovery process, and now you're in long-term recovery, and you can begin to see that if there's anything that I can do now to continue to build a relationship with my children, now for number one is to stay out of the penitentiary. Number two is to stay clean, right? And to continue on the path that you're on right now, right? Tell me, what would you tell other men who have crisis, maybe not the same one, but maybe some of the challenges that dads have, because some dads have difficult challenges getting back into the life of their children, whether it was a separation, it was incarceration, it was drug addiction. What are some of your, what would be your takeaway to them to say, hey, look, these are some of the things that I think that would benefit you?
Well, here's to those fathers And we all have our challenges in different situations. And what I would suggest to the fathers is get a group of people first. Get around some positive people for when you do have to address certain issues. There's someone there you can talk to. A lot of us, and I'm speaking of myself, I would shut down and wouldn't talk to anybody and let them know what was going on, fearing that they would judge me or, you should be able to handle it. But a lot of things we just can't handle by ourselves. We need support.
Yeah.
So you fathers out there, I suggest that you grab around some people. And then for me, again, I won't say the church, but I'll say my spiritual help was there because I needed somebody spiritual who could guide me and had some experience.
Yeah.
And then there also, if you don't have a family, you may not have a brother or father to go to, but look inside of your own unit. It could be you have a daughter you can talk to or a son. Try reaching out to your own family and see where you can grab some support, because we can't do it by ourselves.
That's good.
You can't, guys.
That's good. I totally agree with you in terms of being able to address the issues. And otherwise, he mentioned, he said, for number one, he had to be honest with himself, right? He had to be honest and identify with where he's at now. I know in the 24/7 Dad curriculum workshop, one of the first trainings is talks about self-awareness, being aware of yourself and being aware of what's going on with you. And you talked about that. And then number two, he talked about being open-minded, being able to be open to receive help from someone else that had been through some of the challenges that he'd been through. Absolutely. And then number three, he talked about the support, using the support of a system that works. He's in long-term recovery now. You're in a system that works now. And so even right now, what you're doing now is helping other men.
Absolutely. And that's another thing I would key in on, guys. There are resources out here. And I know a lot of us don't have the information, but start from ground zero. If it's just in the neighborhood, in the community where you are, walk around, reach out and ask, is there somebody in the neighborhood that you can go to and find the resources that may attach to whatever issue you have? And then there's always the internet.
Awesome.
You can use Google just about anything.
University.
So, and so there are resources out there, guys, that can help you and direct you to the resources that you may have to address your issues.
Awesome. Well, look, man, I'm so excited, man. Thank you for coming out and for joining us in this Dad Talk. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening. Once again, this is Dad Talk, where we talk to dads and we just kind of listen to what was some of the challenges versus what was some of the barriers that they're facing and how did they overcome some of the challenges. So, Greg, thank you, man, for coming out. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. Hey, I want to remind you again, Earl mentioned earlier that there's a link